Welcome, everyone, to the Lighter Mind podcast. In the Lighter Mind, we explore spirituality, personal growth, trauma, recovery, and the path to wholeness. The Lighter Mind podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any forms of mental illness. We are not licensed therapists unless otherwise noted, and these are experiential conversations. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Lighter Mind podcast. Today, we have a very special guest with us. His name is McRae, and I have been working with McRae for the last several months, and I spend a lot of time bullshitting with McRae at work and talking about philosophy and mythology, and we spend a lot of time trying to figure out how we can best serve the population that we're trying to serve. And I found out pretty early in, like after I met McRae, that he was a very kind-hearted, wise, and intelligent individual. And I also discovered pretty early on that he's one of the most fucking inappropriate people I've ever met in my entire life. So buckle up, listeners.
Love it. You'll fit right in.
Yeah. So without further ado, I wanted to pass it over to you, McRae. And so if you could just tell us who you are, what you do, and like what kind of, started the journey that you're on right now.
Okay. My name's McRae, and, I think I grew up in a house of all the self-help books from the 60s and 70s. So I used to read those even as a kid. And so I always felt like the psychologist or those people had the answers somehow. And I wanted those. So I immediately, maybe 12 or so, read Fear and Loathing. And so I immediately started trying to figure things out, and I did just a ton of drugs, and really liked it, and started trying to see if there was more. And so I always wanted to be in some kind of therapy role, but then, I got in recovery and started looking at things differently. And that was like 40 years ago. And I've stayed in this kind of work, not necessarily with addiction, but with a lot of different aspects of mental health. So I've done a whole bunch of things, and I'm licensed in none. And so, and that's why I'm here. So that's what I've got.
Nice, man. Nice. So you have, you just hit 40 years of sobriety not too long ago, didn't you? So you have some hell of an experience, kind of getting to where you are right now. And I've always heard from, the people that we're trying to serve, just how helpful you actually are, and like the way that you're able to kind of keep it real. And, I know that a lot of the conversations that we have helped me, like a pretty significant amount. And, and you also, you were working on your LPC. Was that kind of on the docket recently?
Yeah, it's all there, but in Georgia, you have an incredibly bureaucratic system that makes me cringe to even think about. And so I'm just waiting for them to do their thing. It won't change anything I do at all. But I figure at least by the time I retire, I should be legitimate. And so that's that.
Fair enough, man. Okay. So if you had to choose like an area of expertise, because I know that you and I, we bullshit like quite a bit about, we dive into like the hero's journey stuff, and then you were, I mean, that's one of the things that one of the topics we've kind of been throwing around recently, and that's something that, I mean, Crow actually introduced me to that many years ago. But if you had to say like a topic like in the realm of psychology, or mythology or philosophy or something, like what would you say is the most interesting for you that you can like bring into your practice?
Hmm. Okay, so there's like probably two answers there. With the hero's journey, I can remember in the '80s, and Joseph Campbell kind of introduced it to the world, to all of us that didn't know anything about it, and I found it fascinating. And then I went to some things. This is during the mythopoetic men's kind of movement, and we had like Robert Blind, James Hillman, Michael Meade, and I got to meet those guys a couple of times, and I feel really fortunate to have done that. And they taught me a lot. I was very young to be in that. I think I was 24, and I can remember Michael Meade looking at me, and he said, "Yeah, just you need to lose a couple of jobs, couple of marriages, and then come back." And I was like, "Yeah, that's probably true. I'm on my way, I promise." But that was influential for me. It really was. And I looked at a lot of more. I was more of a Hillman fanboy because he was probably the preeminent Jungian analyst in the States, and he brought that to it. So I looked more at kind of the underworld areas, and the trickster was more appealing to me than the king. And I just, that's kind of where I was, and I still think about that quite a bit. And I thought about it recently. I was getting out of the shower, and I looked at myself, and I was looking at all the tattoos I've got, and I never dawned on me what they really are showing me. But it's a lot of that. And then briefly, I am a huge fan, and I try to bring this into my work, of mindfulness, and but not the mindfulness is defined so differently, and the way I see it is different, and it's more about trying to lose that sense of self, not to become psychotic, but just to loosen that sense of self, because it is an illusion, and it affects people in every aspect of their life. And the more loose you can get that, the better, or that's what I've found. And it gives relief, and you can easily translate that into the rooms. So, the bondage of self is the problem. So,
Yeah. Yeah, that bondage to self. Because I know that we've kind of touched on that topic in here, like that bondage to self. Um, yeah, that's a tough one, especially when you are in recovery and you are so disconnected from everything and everyone, including yourself, and you are at a place where you're so focused on like the external, usually like we just want something to make us feel better, and and then all of the different characteristics and behaviors that come into that, of like the selfishness, the dishonesty, the manipulation, the overthinking, like the where that ego really kind of steps in. Like that's a pretty tough place to separate from, right? And that's something that all of us on this call right now have been able to do. And it's not something that like goes away. It's something that you have to manage over time, right? And that's kind of like the maintenance of long-term recovery. For the most part, it's just making sure that we don't go back to our old fucked up ways.
yeah.
you know
And especially, you don't know yourself when you're getting sober. So trying to disconnect from something you don't even know is a big order. And I can remember early on in a halfway house being guided in a meditation, and I was very interested in it. and we were doing it, and I remember being really hot and just sitting in there, and I was sweaty, and I immediately started thinking, oh yeah, get my chakras aligned, my kundalini's coming up, I'm on fire. And I told the guy that, and he looked at me, and it was perfect. He just said, that's still withdrawals anyway. And then yeah, he was right. I mean,
Yeah.
a lot to learn.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Unlearn. Yeah.
Unlearn.
That's a tough thing. So the reason that I really wanted to bring McRae on here is because a lot of the topics that the three of us discuss is stuff that I continue to talk about when I'm at work with McRae. You know, a lot of recently we've been talking about bringing a men's group, to the community of Savannah, something. um they have a program out here called the Man's Kind Project, which is something I'm trying to get involved in, that follows the initiation process of the hero's journey. But I just think that, like, I don't know. I think, like, the longer I'm on my journey, I think it starts becoming more apparent that I need to be helpful to other people in various ways to continue to break that bondage of self, to break some of that selfishness, to break some of the me tendencies, which I very much have. And, I'm getting to that point where I feel responsible to a certain extent, because we only keep what we have by giving it away, right? But we've been kind of diving down that rabbit hole to bring some of this, the inner work that, like, all of us have done, to a wider community, right? So, but I don't know, but a lot of the stuff that we talk about on here, is exactly, the stuff that both of us kind of bring into the work that we do with, the people that we're trying to serve. And, um, so I want, you guys to pick the brain here. Do you guys have any questions about, like, what he does, who he is? This is the first time you're meeting him, so let's get into it.
Alan, you have any? I got a million questions for you guys out there in Georgia because, I don't know, McRae, if you're familiar with Jamie Wheel, and a book that Alan actually turned me on to several years back called Recapture the Rapture. And it's a fantastic book of asking these very questions. And then what is a way that we can bring that rapture moment in our field, or to anybody, their awakening moment? What is the thing? What is, and there is no one path, of course, because everybody's out here living life, telling themselves a different story about themselves. So it's as you said, the softening of those edges, and it's the loosening of that bond of identification, the ego, just enough to be able to peer beyond that, to feel safe enough to be able to tell yourself a different story, and in that realize also, holy cow, I was just full of shit. I was telling a story my whole life. And then to that point of realization that it's good, this manifestation thing, because it actually works. It was just I was telling the wrong story about myself because it wasn't the authentic story coming up from deep within. So it's the questions, and I guess for you guys with this men's group, I'm curious now. Kyle, you got me going. If you find the formula for this and you find I know that it's going to evolve an ecology of practices that sort of go around the edges of these questions, right? It's not just one way. One way that I have over time, and I've been here going on about 5 years to this center that I'm at, I quit talking about meditation. I just gave up. You know what I'm saying? Because the word, it brings up too many scary connotations for folks, and they're just, immediately shut down. So I've, in the last year, have done something else, which is, well, let's go underneath that by doing breath work, guided breath work. And there's a lot of Colorado's the same, Kyle. We understand that you got to be very, very careful with that breath work thing in the way that state mandates that. But I just simply put on what's accessible to anybody on YouTube, or another app that I really, really, Alan also turned me on to, called Othership. And I put on some of these apps and get them, their bodies, to a place that is just so vegged out. And then I say, all right, have a great day. And then we release them for the morning. But at least they don't have to think about how they feel. They just get to feel within the feeling. And then I always, release them with, now this is the launching point to a true meditative state.
I got a question for you, Crow. Are you doing holotropic? Are you doing rebirthing breath work, or do you know any of that? Is any of that kind of stuff? Because I'm getting into that kind of shit as well.
No, Kyle, I won't go holotropic.
Okay.
I won't go that far, that deep, because now the results could be something that's way beyond my expertise, my control, and I don't want to go there. I find that a little bit too immersive right out of the gate.
You're dealing with altered states of consciousness at that point, and you can have some spiritual crisis that happen when you get into that kind of shit.
Absolutely.
I've done it before, and it's
I know you're a fan of that, and I know, and I've heard your experiences in the past about it, and there's no way I want to take anybody that deep.
It's wild.
So
it's wild.
I stand a little bit, I go for the basics. Like, let's scratch the tip of the iceberg and just get you to relax and your nervous system to alter slowly.
Well, I think having used the Othership app for like 5 years now, 4 or 5 years, I do it way more than any kind of mindful practice. And it really honestly is, because, there's a gazillion different things you can do. There's psychedelic experiences, there's gratitude. But the one, I think how it helps with Crow's situation is you really become mindful of your breath. It's not saying be mindful of your breath, but you have to, because you're being guided, and it's a 4 count. And so you get locked in. So your brain kind of channels into the experience, and it really lets you let go of a lot of what you're holding. And we found that with the kids when I would run the mindful meditation thing with the at-risk teens, and like, half of them were like, fuck this, I'm not doing this shit. And I'm like, well, just lay there and keep your mouth shut, right? And then all of a sudden they'd be asleep, because they were actually doing what I said to do, but they, they were resisting it because of what, an ODD or whatever tag you want to put on them. But the ones that got it, were just like, they'd all fall asleep. And I did that when I first started doing mindfulness, meditation, breath work, always fall asleep, because your body's finally taken that time to get into parasympathetic mode. And you're like, oh my God, I'm not on fucking watch right now. My brain doesn't have to look for all these threats, and I can be relaxed and calm. So, so the Othership is good because there are psychedelic experiences. There are some that are where you're holding your breath for 2 minutes, which is just insane. So I'd usually do those in the summer. I get out there, get the twins out in the sun, do the, these ones. And basically you're visualizing your own death in a lot of these. and how you're going to talk to yourself and your loved ones that you visualize around you, like saying, I'm sorry I hurt you. I'm sorry that I hurt myself, and it can get really emotional, but I think the breath work is really kind of like getting the camel's nose in the tent for, traditional kind of mindfulness, and that you don't have to be like alone with your thoughts or, oh, I have to, this or that. It's just you're focused on your breathing and you have no other option because someone's counting it down. And with other ship, they have like DJs that work with them. So there's cool rhythms. So, they do a 4 count, but the beat is on the 4 seconds. So eventually sometimes they'll just fade out, but you're rolling with it because your brain is just going with this whole process. And I think that to me it's a good introduction for people that think it's too woo woo to meditate or be mindful. So that's kind of my thing. And speaking of recapture the rapture, yesterday I talked to a college friend that I haven't spoken to in 30 years. He retired Friday as a homicide detective. And he asked me to go to Colombia to do an ayahuasca retreat with him because he has so much trauma from being a homicide detective. He goes, I've seen so many dead children and so many dead bodies for 30 years that I need to reset. And I said, well, maybe before you jet down to another country and do ayahuasca, which I'm fine with. I want to do it eventually. I tried to have my last brewery I worked at pay for me and my staff. They said, we're going to send you on a retreat. I said, we're going to, South America to do ayahuasca. I'm like, oh no, you can't do that.
Let's go.
Yeah. So I told them about, Mast and Kip, reclaim your nervous system, claim your power. I said, maybe because it's based on the hero's journey. I said, hey, you've done this thing for 40 years and you need a reset. And maybe you need to do this and journal about this. Cause like I've said, when I did that book, I was bawling, doing the journaling for the 40 days of dealing with your bullshit. And then I told them about Recapture the Rapture. I said, probably the best book I've read, in the last few years. So anyhow, sorry to derail the conversation, McRae, because we're trying to learn about you, but I figured I'm the only one that's actually not a professional in the industry. I'm just a guy that fucks around all the time. So
that has set me straight a number of times on my journey. And so, McRae, what methods are you using that can, as we were saying, it can sort of loosen, as you were talking about, loosen that control? What do you find most useful? Please tell me, because I think that's the thing of the thing. That's the stuff of the stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. So it'll help if I do this. So I don't feel like mindfulness is any kind of meditation at all. And it's not guided. It's none of that. That's a different thing. There's a woman, I think her last name is Langer, and I'm embarrassed that I can't remember her name. She's probably she has studied mindfulness longer than anybody. She's a professor at Harvard. She's done it for 40 years before, Cabot and, all of those guys. But when she's on podcasts, she comes off as brusque. So I don't think she's popular. She doesn't come off that way to me, but it's like this. I just try to teach people to be here, because this is it. This is the show. The whole fucking thing is this. So if I'm able to, for me personally, I'll use, you use your senses. You hear it, like even on Pinterest, it's like, see colors and, touch textures and ground yourself. It's kind of like that. For me, if I try to smell, because you attenuate the smell so fast, if I try to do that, it helps me be here. And I just see just what's happening now. but that's extremely hard to do for me. You know, I'm definitely ADD, and I just have never been good at any of that. So I got an app. Um, eh, it's Sam Harris, who is probably
Mhm.
well known for a lot of things, but he has Waking Up, which is the app I really love. He has Making Sense, which I don't like, because it's political and it's all of his political axe grinding, and we disagree. But the Waking Up app is just a collection of mindfulness. He has all of Alan Watts, all of it, the whole collection. But he has all of these people, current people, talking about it. There's Sufis, there's Hindus, there's everyone. And when they talk about it, I was hearing something very different from what I understood. And then there was an English guy, and he talks about the headless way. And I'll try to remember his name. But I love this guy. He's all over YouTube. He does a bunch of stuff for free. But Douglas Harding wrote the book that he talks about, The Headless Way. But it's like this, and you'll be able to do this. If I'm sitting across from Kyle, or I'm looking at you guys, Alan and Crow, if I'm looking at you and I put my attention and I focus on what is in front of me, what I see, that's it. If I try to turn that attention on myself, in other words, and you can't, but if you try to perceive yourself, so in other words, I'm looking out at you guys, and then I turn that attention on myself. When I turn my attention on myself, what I have is you guys and everything I can see here. That's all there is. I'm not even in the fucking picture. So for some reason, conceptually, I know people understand that. But if you do it, something really odd happens. And for me, the chatter goes away. So the internal narrative or the automatic thoughts, that stuff disappears. So I try to really focus on being headless so that, in other words, my perception is a place for the world. It's where everything is. And neurologically, that's correct. And we can talk about that. That's a rabbit hole I love. But that simple little trick, what those guys found is that most people are like, okay, so I'm headless. So what? And unless you've tried to be present and worked at trying to be, you miss what that shortcut hands you. But if you've tried and suffered and tried to do it, that little trick puts it in your lap. And that is a powerful, powerful tool. And, I've done a lot of groups with adults, with adolescents. I love Alan talking about working with those kids. I've spent a long time working with kids that couldn't be in the regular school system, so they came to our school, and the job was to help them get back. And a lot of them will never get back. And, they just have behaviors that you can't have in a regular school.
Good.
And yeah, for sure. Anybody that thinks otherwise needs to come for a few minutes. But after they've tackled somebody, they'll figure it out. But that kind of mindfulness is what I think of as mindfulness, is just being here. And there are a lot of people who really get that, but you also get the extreme, where I've heard interviews where somebody is like, hey, there's nothing to get. You're it already. Well, I mean, that's great. That doesn't fucking help me. So, when you're sitting there saying that, or, the person you refer to as McRae, I don't want to hear that. I won't help. So The help is more from this simple, humble Englishman who talks about it with this incredible joy. And he also makes it clear that, he was exposed to that early, that headless way. And people will say, well, like he's an enlightened figure, but he's so quick to chuckle and go, oh, well, I mean, you still are going to be depressed and have panic attacks and do all this shit.
Mhm.
And I really love that because I think that's part of it. We all wonder, have I got it? Even in like 12-step programs, when people find that they don't have a desire to use anymore, they're wondering if they got it. And I'm like, bro, I don't know about you, but not wanting to use is the burning bush. That's it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay. It, this is great to hear, McRae, or I don't know, but that's the same approach I'm using, which is, and I come at it several different ways, but one is through that Deepak Chopra, lesson in Be Here Now. I think that was the name of the book. But anyway, he describes as, in this moment, as you're listening to me, you're staring at me through a screen, you're sitting in that chair, the smell of the room you're in, you don't have any problems.
Yes.
But the moment you go into the past, the moment you go into the future, now you have problems, because every minute, every second of your day is one challenge to the next. It's not a problem, it's a challenge. So if you don't know of the problem before it comes, it's not a problem. It's just a simple challenge that you've overcome. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. You'd be dead, swallowed alive by problems. So what we are is a collection of challenges, not problems. And so that's one way to look at it. But another thing that struck me in what you were describing is, I try to teach a lot of Stoicism. And the Stoics had one of the skills that they practiced and leaned into was the same as the ancient monastics, which is the end of day review and rewind everything that you did throughout your day. And you probably won't get much past the next 2 hours as you lay your head on the pillow, because you will realize then how absent-minded we are throughout the day. There's just so many blank spots, like, wow, 1 second I was in the cafeteria talking to people, and then I must have ended up in my room. Yeah, but
So where were you?
Yeah, what about the walk to your room? And you missed saying hi to everybody. You were just an automatic robot. You were thinking, and you weren't present. So it's a way of making them start to practice these Stoic methodologies, and it brings to mind sort of anything we can do to help folks get into a metacognitive framework mind, so that you're looking at your thoughts, not through them. So I'm studying my thoughts as I say them, and not identifying with the thought, to step outside. And they called this practice the view from above, which is just sort of zoom out from yourself, to look. On occasion, just wake up sometime during your busy day, and just say, hey, I'm going to take a second and look at me, almost from above, and look at my thoughts, and just a reprieve for just a second. So back to the Stoics, that's basically a different approach that I've taken, that reminded me very much of what you were saying, in that metacognitive framework. Anything to get them there.
Yeah. I was late to Stoicism. A guy I really love uses it. He has done it for years. And when he explained it and I started reading Epictetus and I tried to put some work in, I was really shocked at how useful it is. And I'm careful about like the metacognition, or I'm careful about thinking about my thoughts as much as noticing that they're thoughts. Of course, you have to. If you have automatic thoughts that
Yes.
are negative, that's a problem. And you're going to have to either challenge those or notice that they're just thoughts, because your brain, like, if like I had a really young girl in a different place that I worked, and she had no choice but to be there. And but she was mortified. She was a South Georgia girl, maybe 19, 20, and she was a new mother, and the baby had what is it where you're always um colicky.
Yeah.
Colicky.
And so she's exhausted. She's a new mother, all that stuff. Well, she's doing what a good mom does. She's doing all the stuff. But this thought came in her head about how to quiet the baby. It wasn't her thought. She wasn't like considering doing something harmful. But just the thought popped up, and it scared her so bad because in her mind, she thought that. But of course, it's almost the opposite. She's a good mom. The reason that came up is it's so counter to what she's trying to do. So we had to talk about what a thought was, and I just assume everyone knows that a thought is not you. So anyway, after that, she was better. So
Well, I read a.
And
oh, go ahead,
I'm
Troy.
sorry, real quick. I love that word that you used, which was notice. Just to notice and observe without judgment and flipping judgment. This is another conversation we've been having at my place lately at work, which is replacing any way we can judgment to curiosity by any means. To notice. I love that word. Thanks, McRae. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
So I had read an article not long ago about those thoughts of doing harm to others and, to babies, animals, whatever it is. And it's actually a healthy thing, a healthy response. Like, because you recoil from it. Like, you think this thought and you're like, oh my God, I'm a horrible person. But like sociopaths and psychopaths don't. They're like, oh, that's a great idea. And then they act on it, and then they're Ted Bundy or whoever. So, having those thoughts and being aware that you're having this thought that is like mortifying, really, like, like just I can't believe that I thought this, is actually a sign of a fairly healthy brain. And I'll have to see if I can find that again, and I'll send it to you guys. It was pretty fascinating. So, but again, it is just a thought, right?
I mean, if you, I'll do this in groups, and it doesn't always work and I'm always amazed. I look for the people that it doesn't work with because they're unusual. But if we sit here and try to think of if you try to name 3 movies, whether you've seen them or not, just 3 titles, and I'll sit and try to come up with 3, and I'll wait for everybody to say they have them in their head, and then I'll ask them for 3 more. And I'll promise that's the last time I'm going to ask. And when we start talking, I ask, how did you get those 3? And I know I can answer confidently how I do it. I wait and they bubble up, and I just grab them when they bubble up. But I'm dating myself, but nobody there is, well, I say that's maybe not true, but it's not like I go through a Rolodex of items that I have in my conscience or my memory somewhere, and I pick the ones. They bubble up. I have no control over that. And even in our conversation now, I have no fucking idea what's going to come out of my mouth. It comes up. I mean, I can probably stop myself in certain situations, rarely, but I mean, I can. And that's the nature of the thoughts that go through people's minds. And so I don't even think of them as my thoughts. I mean, yeah, I'm noticing them, but, and I love what you said, that the reaction that girl had was precisely that, Alan. I mean, she was so mortified by it. She
Right.
checked herself into a psych unit
Wow.
because she thought it was her. You know, if I identified with all my thoughts, I'm pretty sure I would be eating a shotgun. I mean, I just, my God, the shit that goes through my head. So,
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. So, there was when I first, probably right, when I first started working with those kids, I was very into the Sadhguru guy, and he had this YouTube meditation where you just sit there and it goes on, but most of it is you're like, I am not my body, I'm not even my mind, and you just like do this mantra for like an hour of that, and it probably takes you an hour. You're like, but I am, like when you're first doing it, like, well, but I'm both. And then you're like, eventually it dawns on you, you're really neither. I always see this commercial because I'm a huge Jeopardy fan, about Prevagen for your most important thing in your body, your mind. And I'm like, it's no more important than anything else, really. Like, don't tell people your brain is the most important thing. Your heart's important, your kidneys, everything. If one of them fails, your brain isn't going to work. So don't, but I think that's the mindset, is like, your mind is the only thing. Like, you're just a walking flesh bag for this brain, and or a mind, because the brain, to me, the mind is the brain in action. So it's just this like, infrastructure to have this crazy little squirrels running around inside your head, thinking whatever they think, and and it's very easy for me to get caught up in my thoughts, and I'll have to like break from it, like.
yeah.
This is nothing, and I think, a lot of people really can't say that this is nothing. Like, these thoughts come in my mind, worry, get the oogies about the stupid shit I did in the past, worry about the future. I'm like, none of this matters, and it's so hard. And I've been doing this, kind of like trying to be in the moment for like 10 years now, and it's still really hard. Like, I'll get caught up in something, or especially, I'll run into someone from the past, and then they like start telling me things that I did back when I was drinking, and and then I'm like, I just have to lay down and ask the universe for some forgiveness, because Jesus, I was a fucking asshole. But yeah, so anyhow, I feel like I've derailed this at the moment. So,
No, I love that, Alan.
Yeah.
Douglas Harding talks about that for the Headless Way, his intro, and this was written, I can't even remember, but, he's a English architect that came up with this. But when he talks about the body, and you're talking about, there's am I my mind? Am I, I know like most of us identify as being about somewhere here. We're so visually oriented it's usually this little person in here that's my consciousness, and looking out of the peepholes of my eyes,
right.
and, like I'm separate. But if you panned from, if I'm looking at Alan, and I started to zoom in on Alan, at some point I'm going to start seeing like just skin, and then just cells, and then just atoms, and then just, depending on how close in I can move. And then if I pan back, and it is Alan, but if I start panning back, then, I'm seeing a continent, and then a planet, and then a universe.
Mhm.
It's still Alan. So we identify as this. but we're everything. You can't not be. You take away the environment and you're dead. But also all the systems and neurons that are going on in my body. And I'm not trying to send people down that road. I'm just trying to show what perspective does. And we're not quite what we think. So when I'm able to just look out and take in everything, that's what I am. What I am is y'all. I can't define myself right now without you in it because you're here. This is it. But talking
That's
about it makes it confusing.
yeah. It's the difference between meaning and experience.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
I like that you
Yes.
mentioned perspective, because I think it sounds to me like you are just really after perspective shifting for the people you've been working with all through the years. That's just a slight turn. It's not awakening. It's not all these big woo-woo words. It's a slight shift that allows us the space to create or find a new context to the movie that we're living.
Oh, wow.
Just
That was well put.
just enough space to, because it's like life is like a movie, and there's all these little different clips put together, but what we're missing is the context. And we don't have the context, and we never will until our last breath. Then now we have a new context, but in whatever form that may take. But what we need is just a slight perspective shift that allows our perception then to shift. And we're still the same people, as you said. You're still irritable. You're still the same ass that you were before, and you're prone to all of the frustrations and things that you were before. But it's like they say in enlightenment, before enlightenment you chop wood and carry water, and after enlightenment you chop wood and carry water. It's the same, but something is different, and that is that I don't identify with everything in the same way. So it sounds to me, McRae, like that's what you're after with a lot of your clients. Am I on it?
I think so. I'm not sure I know. I find that, like if I become clinical and I look at like the number one reported reasons for relapse and all that stuff after some time, it's always people not feeling comfortable in their skin and emotional dysregulation. And then they start looking for, work on their trauma and, everything else to fix it. But they're not staying clean. And I know I struggled terribly with this. I was so, I'm fairly high strung by nature. And then my environment and situations made it 10 times worse. And so I arrived sober and just really hypervigilant and high strung and edgy. And, but I'm nice. So I was trying to, if you're in a 12-step program and they're saying, yeah, man, if you're really angry, resentful, or a hothead, that's a relapse coming. And I used to think, well, then I'm fucked because, I spend most of my time in one of those. So I was desperate to find some relief from that. And so when I see new people coming in or people that are suffering, it's because they're lost in thought. I'm convinced of it, that all suffering is being lost in thought, meaning you're identifying with that. If I look around and say, well, what's wrong right now? And I think, I can't remember who just said this, there's nothing wrong right now. And now is the reality. It's Ellen Langer. That's the long-term study person on mindfulness. You should really check her because she'll tell you quick it's not meditation. But if you're identified with thought, you're going to suffer. And the Buddhists tried to tell us this. We just wouldn't hear it. And I think, the Buddhists with skillful living and AA with just the steps, those are all things for skillful living, just being able to live with some kind of integrity and character, so that I don't have to think much about it. So I spend very little time thinking about that stuff. And I used to think about it a lot. Now, I'm also old. So, I mean, now I try to just be here. I'm convinced that if I could be here in a real way, that here would last forever. It would just, because that's it. But see, then I go into conceptual things. And when I'm trying to teach it, it becomes conceptual and the words ruin it.
Yes. Yeah.
In fact, you said it, Crow, from meaning to experience. I wrote it down. I really loved that. The way
That's
you
Joseph
said that.
Campbell. That's not Crow. I'm not that good, McRae.
I'm giving it to Crow, but
I don't think one of his quotes, one of Joseph Campbell's quotes, is, I don't believe people are looking for the meaning of life as much as they are the experience of being alive. And
damn,
that's,
Joseph.
I know, damn you, Joseph. Why didn't I come up with that? But if you really think about it, we want that. But the cost is so frightening, because now when, we, at the beginning of groups, you got to do CADS and a feeling word, mood. What's your mood? And they may say, I'm irritable. And then they're pissed about the fact they're irritable.
Yeah.
And I say to them, well, what's wrong with that? At least you feel something. If you didn't, you'd be dead. So you better be grateful that you're irritable. It's like, I'll check with you at lunch. I'm sure irritable won't be who you're identifying with.
Yeah.
It's so now another way that I ask them is, what are you experiencing here and now?
Yeah.
And then that mood word changes. So I'm trying to encourage them. It's an experience you're having. It's not who you are. Don't give me the I am, blah, blah, blah. And then you're pissed because you're blah, blah, blah. There's your little fast twitch of suffering in between there and there. So it's crazy how we have a mood and then we get pissed about it. It's like, I shouldn't be restless, irritable, and discontent. Why? And
I like that you tell them they're lucky to have it. If we're such spiritual giants that my loved one can get killed and I can detach from it and be in the present fine and with equanimity, that's not a goal for me. I want to fucking suffer right then. And, I hope I do feel it. And if I don't, then there's something wrong.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think if you don't have feelings, there's something wrong. Like if you're not occasionally angry or joyful, like if you're just 1,000-yard stare and nothing affects you, then that to me is a huge warning flag. Like, this is bad. Like, what are you going to do to feel? You're going to cut yourself. You're going to shoot yourself because you want it. I think everyone wants to feel something. I'd say most of us want to feel love and appreciated, understood. I think that's pretty key. Like, it's pretty hard to go through life and not be understood. And I think, self-understanding is part of that as well, which kind of just dials into what we've been talking about. So my thought is, anyone that doesn't feel things I'd be more worried about. Like, I was fucking pissed this morning.
Mhm.
I woke up cranky. The dogs kept going in and out and barking last night. And I woke up, I'm like, this day. And then I sat there and I've been doing this little thing from these feng shui dudes where I'm like, this is going to be the best day ever. And I'm laying in bed and I'm like, the fuck it is. And I just kept telling myself, this is going to be the best day ever. And finally I got up, and then, you know, my wife was like, well, let's rearrange the downstairs living room. And I'm like, all I want to do is have a little breakfast and a podcast. But I'm like, "Rah, rah, rah, rah," you know, and then this started, and all that stuff didn't matter. Like, it was just, I was in a moment, but I wasn't really in the moment because I was thinking about the podcast, and I was thinking about how angry I was with 3 barking dogs. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, you're alive. You're doing something you love. We got a new guy coming on that's going to, you know, and, you know, there was some like, well, it'll be interesting to see. You know, I knew Kyle had said McRae is the best. So I was like, okay, we know he's going to be okay. Because Kyle, you like us. So you're a pretty good judge of character, I'm saying. So, so yeah, so, you know, I think trying to, and this is probably my biggest or the biggest criticism of stoicism, and I think it's misguided, is that you're non-feeling, right? Like, I remember when I was a kid, my mother would, and father, before they got divorced, would yell at me, and I would just sit there silently and stare at him, and they're like, you're such a stoic. So from like 4 years old on until I actually started reading Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus and all that, I was like, thought a stoic was someone who had no emotions, you know? And there was this band back in my little punk rock days. It was actually a British mod band that they were called Secret Affair, and they were not very popular, but they had this whole song about how they never showed emotions. And I was like, yeah, this is it, man. Never show your emotions. Just be a blank slate all the time. And yeah, no, it doesn't really work. You know, I
No,
mean, it
no.
just makes you repress them, and it just makes things worse, right? So I think getting it out, like, sometimes I just think you need to vomit it out, but I think you need to be more positive. I read a thing this morning, and it was talking about, you know, your thoughts, and this goes to Marcus Aurelius, your thoughts, you know, color your soul. So anyone that complains about things, even if it's not them, if you're complaining about other people, you're just going to get into that kind of thing. So, you know, try to be loving and just like love everything. And, you know, like, I lay there at night and I'm like, well, and we talked about this last week, challenges. Thank you for the challenges you gave me, you know, but I'm going to wake up tomorrow and accept these challenges and be grateful that I have them, and try to be loving in every situation and softer, you know, like dealing with my 93-year-old mom. You know, there's times I'm just like, oh my God, but I'll sit there and listen to her, and she'll like boo doo doo and telling me kind of the same story, and she's housebound, so she's lonely and sad, and, you know, so I just sit there and I'm like, I'm going to treat this with grace and softness. So that's like, you know, and to me that's mindfulness. Like, I'm going to be mindful of this conversation that I'm going to have with someone who's old and lonely and just wants to talk. And it might just be the most annoying thing ever that I've heard 50 times, but I'm just going to treat it with grace and softness and with an open heart, you know? So,
yeah, what you just brought something to mind, Alan, with that is the challenge, and challenging that sort of that narrative within our head. What are you guys, McRae and Kyle, what do you guys do to how do you impress that concept on people you work with or move with, that's the healthy place to go? It seems like an obstacle, like I don't want to, like I want to run from it, but to challenge is the healthy place. You know what I'm getting at here, what I'm driving at, is that we do need to lean in and challenge that. What's an effective way you guys are coming at that topic?
So if it's a thought, like when
Like
I
with the
worked at
girl. with the young woman, with the new mother.
Yeah. Well, with her, it was just a matter of convincing her that she's not her thoughts. That was hard. But I, I think I, I think it's important to notice the thoughts, like you're saying. If I'm in a world where my narrative is being dictated by inaccurate thoughts, or I'm believing them, or I'm having memories. I have a close friend. He was sober before I was, and we drank together. I mean, and got sober together. And he was telling me he's dealt with depression, and he was explaining that he had thoughts about middle school where he realized he wasn't cool. And he was telling me this. I was dumbfounded. It blew me away. His IQ is extremely high. He's functional. I mean, but he said he had these memories of that, and that it makes him feel a certain way. And I asked him about those memories, and he was telling me. And I was thinking about the douches that he was referring to, because I went to the same school, and I was like, dude, they're not cool. But you know, we're very different, and so he has to challenge that. He has to ask himself, is that what's the evidence for that? He needs a very stoic approach to that. But if it's just thoughts, my argument will always come back to that I'm lost in the thought, and that I need to look at what's in front of my face. Because that's the only thing that's real. And, you know, you can experience that. Has everyone done mushrooms? Has anyone here not done mushrooms? Psilocybin?
I have not in sobriety.
Well,
I
not
got
in
a bunch
sobriety.
in the freezer if you want some.
Let's go to Alan's.
Yes. I know they've been there for years, Alan.
No,
I'm
they
waiting.
haven't. They're actually from the university where they're doing psychotherapy with mushrooms, and somehow they found it to my freezer.
Good for you.
Claiming the fifth or whatever it is on
Yeah.
this. But go ahead. Sorry to derail again.
No, I love that. But I can remember the last time I did mushrooms, and really fondly, because it was just a great experience, which it usually is. So, and I was curious about what makes that so good. And then I was listening to research on mindfulness, and they were talking about the default mode network, those 5 areas of your brain where they, see that when we're not doing task, when the doer isn't in line, then we just kind of drift. It's kind of washing dishes and your mind's just drifting, or driving and your mind's drifting. That's the default mode network. And they're finding more research. It's not as black as white as people talk about it. But mindfulness shuts that down. And so does psilocybin.
Mm-hmm.
And so the reason we all love psilocybin is because you're mindful. Your default mode network is shut down. You're also intoxicated. I mean, you're not going to act normally, but you can do that with mindfulness. You can shut that area down by simply being here.
Mm-hmm.
And, my son, who's 21, 22, he used to show me like videos on Instagram where like guys are skateboarding and they break their ankles or get hurt. And I hate that, because I hate looking at it, because it just makes me cringe. I have a reaction to it because I'm thinking about it. But I've broken my ankle, my kneecap, my ribs countless times, my wrist. I mean, I've broken so much shit, and it's never bad. It's over in a second. It's like, and then you're like, oh shit, that's not good. And, but there's not the same experience, because it's not me thinking. I'm there. I'm right there when it happens.
Mm-hmm.
And that's tolerable. So in my head, no matter how bad the situation is, no matter what the situation is, the answer from suffering is to be there. in it.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like it just ties into all of it.
Yeah.
Well, one
So
thing
the suffering is closing around it, is not going into it.
Yes.
So you mentioned something also earlier. That is a word that I teach people all the time as much as I can, is that word of equanimity
Yeah.
and the importance of equanimity and holding the paradox of holding those opposing forces. And the Greek had a word, tonos, which meant tone. It's where we get our word for tone. And a string on a guitar and an instrument has to be strung taut, very taut on both ends, to make a chord, to make a sound, to make a beautiful chord. If it's not held tight on both ends, equanimity, then you're not equanimous, and that's just, there's no tone, there's no beauty, there's no harmony. So we have to have the paradox of opposites in that. And I love that you used that word equanimity. I'm big on that word, teaching folks about that, because that's not a much used word outside of spiritual circles. So they're beautiful. Alan, you had a point.
Oh, well, anyhow, we were going back to the hallucinogens. I always found in college that if I was getting overwhelmed, like seriously, like schoolwork was on me, party lifestyle was kind of draining my energy, I would just take acid and everything would reset. Like seriously, I would wake up the next day and all these things I was worried about that I thought were like, crushing me were not important. Like none of that was important. Like I had this complete reset of my brain or my mind or whatever. At the time I was like, I don't know what this is or how this works, but this is amazing because all the shit was on my shoulders is no longer there and it doesn't matter. Just realign your priorities, realign your focus, and get through this in much more of a flow state kind of way rather than, having this pressure and all these thoughts coming into your head, about stress. I mean, and that might, to me, the whole university experience, although it was fun and it was stressful in that, you're taking, and I would do these things where I would like overload credits one semester and then take like 9 the next and then 24 the next. And it was probably stupid. I probably should have just gone with like a normal thing and not put that on me, but I would just like so overwhelm myself with one semester, then do a kind of reset and take another semester where I kind of just like skated and then the next, so, but I do find value in psychedelics, and we've had Jill on who does psychedelic assisted therapy with ketamine and hallucinogens. So, I'm not telling everyone run out and go drop acid and, do whatever. Because, who knows? And I remember the guy I was talking to yesterday, the Denver cop, he was saying how in college he was like, yeah, I never did any of that with you guys because at one point you told me that the government says you're clinically insane if you've done it 3 times. And I said, yeah, that might have been the truth. I don't know if it was. I go, the flip side is the CIA used to say it was the safest drug out there if you were mentally stable, but they didn't want to let you know that because, like I told him yesterday, I said, it opens a lot of doors of awareness about a lot of things. And they can't have a lot of people who are aware running around the planet because then they can't control you, right? Like if the sheep realize that they're sheep, they may say, fuck you, wolves. There's 50 of us and 1 of you, and we're going to smash you to death. So, that was kind of the conversation that went out yesterday about that. So, and I don't know, I'm not saying it's for everyone. It was extremely helpful for me. you know,
Yeah.
and I still microdose LSD fairly often, you know. It's just a good thing. Like, seriously, it just makes you a little more creative. You aren't tripping, nothing's happening, right? You do this and it's just a nice day and makes you look at the world as a prettier place, and you're like, wow, that's not that bad. Nah, who cares?
It's not end of the world stuff anymore.
Right.
It's put into a different, as McRae was saying, a different perspective.
Right.
And McRae, did you read a lot of Aldous Huxley then?
Not since I got clean, but
Okay.
but I just wanted to take massive doses. I wanted it to feel different than it did now. And so, but I noticed on Instagram, I have a lurker account so I don't get doxxed. But they showed a video of a guy in his car laughing, and he's eating like 10 hits of acid, and he says that, the world's about to change. And I couldn't help but to laugh. It was funny. And I was reading the comments, and people thought it was like they had studied under Nancy Reagan. It was mind blowing. Everybody thought the guy was going to die. And I couldn't help it. I commented and I laughed and I said, he'll be fine. And people really were reactive to it. And I said, listen, I have wadded a sheet of blotter acid that I was supposed to be selling in my mouth. And, that's 100 hits. And, it was stupid. But the thing is, it wasn't that big of a trip because I'd been eating it for about a month. It just, but people don't understand drugs. And if you ever look at drug use for adults, I can't think of the gentleman's name. He's at Brown University. And it's a great book. He talks about the real effects of drugs. I wish I had read it before I became addicted to so much shit. I don't have any problem with drugs or hallucinogenics. I've seriously considered a lot of them in sobriety. My motives aren't good. And I can't get away from it. I try to, like my daughter, she's
That's
35.
good. Then you must
She
have
used to
gotten into a
ask me
lot
to do
of Terrence
ayahuasca.
McKenna.
I didn't hear it.
Hold on. I just cut this out real quick.
Oh, we lost you on this end.
Right, well. No.
Yeah, I think
Damn
we've
it.
lost McRae there.
Well, now it's you and me, Crow. Here we are. Well, folks, we've had a slight technical problem. They'll be working on it. So how have you been?
Fantastic. Man, I know that was a good thought McRae had too.
Yeah.
I know it was, because he's dropping some beauty so far. And I'm loving listening to his stories about his journey.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's good. I'm glad he's joined us. I think this has been an interesting day, and it's nice to have a different perspective than just us,
yeah.
And yeah.
It is. It's fresh concepts, fresh ideas.
Well,
And it sounds like it's all circling back to sort of the journey that you and I have taken as well. I like that conversation about the Stoics and about Stoicism and about the whole not feeling, as you were putting it out there. That's not what Stoicism is.
right.
Did you know? I just learned this recently, Alan. You'll appreciate this. That modern day therapists and clinicians have about I don't know, 3 to 4 really good methods of challenging and handling and working with anger issues. But historians go back and they read meditations. Aurelius comes up with about almost 10 because that was one of his primary issues that he had, bad anger issues. So he was constantly challenging them with different thoughts, and some of his quotes would each time would come through the different books, would come at him with different solutions to how he's working with his anger. So really it's we were on McRae's conversation.
Very much so. Psychedelics.
Yes.
Psychedelics. But here's another question I have for McRae then, because I found this guy very, very useful in my early recovery, and I still do, but it's Terence McKenna.
That's who I was talking about with drug use for adults. Oh, no, Terrence. No, that's wrong.
Terence he passed away, I think, in the late 80s or something like that. But yeah, very useful to me. The psychedelic bard.
See, you did the intellectual, with Terrence. That's a different approach. I was immature and reading Hunter S. Thompson and Fear and Loathing, not like the movie, but the book. And I wanted that. I mean, at 12, which is, I don't understand that, but I did. So
is it Carl Hart?
Yes, Dr. Carl Hart.
Yeah, drug use for grown-ups, Chasing Liberty in the Land of Fear. So looks interesting.
It's a great book. Right. I mean, it really is. I agree with them. I wish I hadn't. Yeah. So the problem I see with hallucinogenics and therapy, if you're using it so that you can be open, and have a sense of openness, like with MDMA, or, if it depends how it's used, but for people who are trying to become enlightened or reach a level of mindfulness, I feel like most of those people keep going back to have more. And you have the experience, and if it shifts, then you walk from that. It has to stay. And the only way I can make it stay is like really focusing on being here right now. And then it's a constant. Otherwise, I'm going to keep wanting that experience, and I'm not really chasing experiences. I just, I'm having to work hard enough just to be here now. So,
Carl Jung warned us about that as well. When he said that, you shouldn't be going down those roads of psychedelics and plant-based and friends of the earth until you yourself are spiritually fit and spiritually prepared. Because for that very reason, which was really, really well put, McRae, because you're going to keep going back, that's a possibility. Yeah, absolutely. So all you're really doing is the same thing as addiction, or raising your hedonistic set point, for some trippy high and fun experience. Or the other thing that might happen is we come back into our bodies, back into reality, and it's an ugly world, and we're right back in it. And until you enter into that and engage in that experience, already prepared and separated from, as your previous conversation, already in a state of disassociation from the sense of self with the world, you're going to sober up from your experience, your trip, and then it's like the body slams back into earth at 1,000,000 miles an hour, and I got to wake up and take out the garbage, and I got to see everything inside my normal world again. And then you're just like, oh, this really sucks now.
See, I don't think, at least for me, that experience is not even remotely what I've ever experienced.
It didn't happen to you?
No. So to me, having been a huge Beatles fan and listening to like the only song that I can stand on fucking Sgt. Pepper is the one with the sitars, Within You and Without You, you know, and reading, you know, when I was in high school, a lot of, you know, Buddhist and thoughts. To me, the psychedelics were a way to help open those doorways that that my conventional thinking wouldn't do, especially at 19 years old, right? And I got to a point where I stopped. I mean, I was like, okay, I've seen enough. I understand this, but I never came out of it like the next day thinking the world was worse, or even months afterwards. Like I'm still like, this is, you know, a beautiful existence, and you've got to look for the beauty. You can't just like, if you look for ugly, all you're going to see is ugly, right? I mean, you know, and this goes to my love of gardening, is that sometimes I'll walk out there and all I see is weeds, even though everyone else that comes out is like, holy shit, these flowers are amazing. And I'm like, yeah, but there's some purslane over there, and there's some, you know, and every year I have a nemesis weed. Like it's the weed of the year, you know, like there's the flower of the year. No, I get the weed of the year, and that's all I see. So for me, having the psychedelic experience was being able to get the ugly away and realize it is beautiful. And even, you know, the mundane, like I relish the mundane. I remember reading an article about Iggy Pop and how much he loved to vacuum because it let him, the noise let him shut off his brain, and he was in that moment, and he's just vacuuming, and it's like the greatest thing.
Mindful.
And I think a lot of people, your mind is just going and going and going, and you can't shut it off. And you try to explain, hey, this might work or this might work. And we've had this conversation about Western men and how they always have to have noise, music on TV, because they don't want to be alone with their thoughts, you know? And I like to be alone with my thoughts. I like silence. I like solitude. I don't, you know, like,
Me too.
I posted on Instagram today, there's two kinds of people in the world, and it's best to avoid both. That's kind of how I feel anymore. Like, you know, I just want to be left alone, you know, and just to my thoughts. I mean, I love my wife and I love spending time with her. I love my life. I love you guys, right? I tell all my friends that I love them. My friend that lives in Spain that we brought up in the running away from things called me. He's back for a short visit, and he was like, well, I'm surprised you haven't brought me up on this podcast more. And he goes, you know, he left a pretty funny message like, I'm running to Boston, and then I'm going to run to California, and then I'm running back to Spain. And it was all tongue in cheek. It was great, you know. And as soon as he called, I was doing some breath work, and my phone will not allow calls through when I'm doing breath work. And then as soon as I saw he left this message, called him back. First thing I said is, I love you, you know? And so to me, the psychedelic experience was learning how to kind of open these doors. And it took me, I'm 61 years old, you know? It took me until, you know, 61 years old to be able to say to another man, I love you, because I'm like, hey, I'm not gay. You know, like just like the dumbest shit ever, right? So, but now it's easy. Like I tell myself I love me. I tell Crow I love him. I tell all my friends, I talk to them, love you, man, you know, because I do, you know, and that's to me was the beauty of psychedelic experience. And if I never do it again, I don't care, you know, and I don't like to trip. Like I don't want to do a big, like all day experience anymore. It's
Heroic
just,
dose.
yeah, it's just too draining. You know, like you get to a point.
Don't be a pussy, Alan.
I'm sorry. I'll tell you what. You guys fly out. We'll have a little. We'll set up a fucking sweat lodge out by the creek out back.
There we go.
And I'm more than happy. But yeah, you know. So I think you know it's again not. One shoe doesn't fit everyone kind of thing. And we've discussed this, like some modalities of therapy will ring true with you, and other ones are like, no, this is stupid. Right. So, and I think for you guys, that's got to be the challenge as you sit with a group of people, knowing that this might not even resonate with this person, but this person might be like, holy shit. And then, the doors to awareness, or, the ultimate goal, I would think, is ascension, above who you are, and what this is. It might ring true to them, and then they get on this path. But other people are like, fucking, what is this crow guy talking about? It's just this woo-woo shit. Nothing's actionable, right? So
that's the key to it. Do you find that too, both of you, Kyle and McRae? Do you guys find that it's like, okay, I know this experience that I'm trying to convey to a group of people, but man, how do I put it into actionable steps? Going back to the top of the hour, we're talking about with the book Jamie Wheel and Recapture the Rapture. He asks these identical questions throughout that book. What is the actionable step that we can bring individuals, communities, the whole world to some point of rapture within themselves? And this is the big key. How, I mean, all of us in recovery is like, how do we transmit the burning bush moment to lead you to that path so that you too can have your burning bush moment and just experience that slight shift, just enough,
I go back to the hero's journey, and I talk about like the purpose of the return. And so I use my story because that's all that I have.
Yes.
That's like that, the only experience I have is my experience. And so I use my story as a form of teaching. And the point of really doing that, and the point of like, having that return, is to hopefully motivate someone else to take their own journey, and then whatever the hell that looks like for them is what it's going to look like for them. But I think I'm very intentional about why I'm sharing my story, to make sure that, for one, my fucking ego's not getting in the way, and I'm not like, oh, look at me, and, I'm so successful in my own recovery. It's like, this is what this process looked like for me. This is what the amount of effort that I had to put in order to get to where I am, and to give them suggestions, and to kind of open and broaden like their thinking to things that maybe they haven't necessarily thought about, but also to let them know that, like, yes, all of this work sucks. It's painful. It's uncomfortable. And you are naturally adverse to it because you're a drug addict. Okay. So, like, no one is trying to take away, like, the difficulty of the situation that you're in, but I'm a product of, like, success in there. Okay. So if I can do it, because I was as fucked up as anyone else in the room, like, if I can do it, like, you can do it too. And your journey might look different than mine, but like, that's the only place that, like, and I do an entire group around the actual hero's return, and one of the things that I asked them is, like, if you were to go speak at a high school where you had to give a talk about, like, your experience with drugs and alcohol and what you've learned, like, what would your story be? To try to, put it kind of back on them, to let them know that, like, your story matters too, and so, and like, there's always the hope that, like, your story can change someone else's perspective on something, but outside of that, like, that's outside of my control. But that's usually where I take it to. I always bring it to, I try to really use, like, that, my story, because fuck, dude, that's all I got.
That is the number one comment I've been hearing lately when I ask and get curious in some of my groups of what is hitting and what is not hitting. What are you guys getting that you've been hearing lately from other groups outside of mine? And I hear that comment predominantly is that when you guys share your stories at bits and pieces, that really brings them a lot of help. But I think I'm going to steal that one from you, Kyle. I'm going to steal that, where one whole group is a focus on the return and to point the camera back at them And
Yeah.
uh,
You got to think about, like, if you go to a 12-step meeting where it's a speaker meeting, like, the reason why that is so profound is because you see someone who has achieved this so-called mountaintop. They've overcome very similar challenges that you have, which I think makes, like, when I see someone who has achieved something that I thought was impossible, which is like the place that a lot of people are in early recovery. Like, they don't think it's possible to live a life without drugs and alcohol.
mhm.
And so when I see someone who has done that, like, it just automatically shifts my perspective about, like, the realms of my own possibilities.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It's a reframe also. What you're speaking to is it's a reframe for them to start looking now at the blessings that got them there to this point, rather than looking through the lens of victimhood. Now they're looking through the lens of gratitude
And
of
survivor.
and survivor. So it's reframe of their story immediately to get them from the to me world to the by me world. I'm going to do this. And yeah, beautiful. That's always a big one, a big hurdle, is to get them out of victimhood.
It's hard to do. It's hard to do.
Well,
All right,
that's why
gentlemen, do we wanna-
I sent you that Rob Halford thing, you and Crow, this morning. I had no idea, 40 years sober, and it was kind of, I'm not a Judas Priest fan because I was a punk rock kid, but I was like, that's pretty cool, he's 40 years sober, and he's like, hey, man, there's people here for you. You can do this kind of thing. So I thought it was pretty neat, and I had no idea it was 40 years sober. So good for him. And, good for McRae being 40 and you boys both at 10. So,
Wow. McRae, 40 years.
Yeah, that's great.
It's a monumental success, dude.
Monumental success. That is huge. And
I was a punk rock kid too.
Good. Yeah.
From the Athens, Georgia scene?
No, I'm from North Carolina, from Fort Bragg, Fayetteville.
Oh, okay.
Beirut.
Okay.
Cool. Yeah, that's it definitely
good stuff.
It definitely changed my life, that's for sure. And we've discussed that before. Like, I was a kid into the Beatles, and then in 78 or something, I heard the Sex Pistols, and I was like, holy shit, I get this, and then it was just this rabbit hole, and this backwater town. It was hard to find it, but I would find it. So life changing.
For sure.
All right, so Kyle, I think you want us to do some gratitudes.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think so. I mean, there is still so much more that I think we could talk about. And so we will have you back, whether you want us, whether you want to be here or not, you're coming. For sure. Yeah, I think we just kind of scratched the surface. But what we usually do at the end of every podcast, McRae, is that we give 3 gratitudes. Okay, so who wants to go first?
I can go.
Okay, cool.
All right, there we go. I'll go. All right. So what am I grateful for? Well, I'm grateful that McRae joined us today and gave us his perspective and some things to think about. And, from his journey, it's really cool. And I'm glad you joined us. And hopefully we'll get to see you more often. And maybe when we get some other guests on, we can have 5 little people here. And, I always think the more minds that are, especially when you bring in, like, if we bring in my former marriage counselor, who's the somatic therapist, it'll be fun to be able to just sit and pick her brain and have a different perspective, because, we're all on our own little journey here. What else am I grateful for? Even though my dogs piss me off all night, and this morning I am grateful for him. Again, these feng shui guys are like, dogs, they're this and that. So I'm like, so I know they love me and I love them, but holy shit, they're challenging sometimes. But again, I ask for more challenges every night. So asking you shall receive. Yeah. And, I'm just grateful that I've been kind of sticking with clean living and working out. So, and it sucks ass. But I feel like my muscles are getting a little bigger. And I was talking to my neighbor the other day. He's like, "How long do you go on that exercise bike?" And I said, "I don't know, an hour." He's like, "I did 2 minutes and I was winded." And I'm like, "Well, we got to get you up to more than 2 minutes." He is 75, so I'm going to give him some slack. But I am happy that I'm actually focused to go into the room next to this and lift those weights and get my heart pumping and try to live longer for what that's worth. So anyhow, those are my 3.
Right on. Kyle, how about you?
I am the obvious, very grateful that you were able to join us today, McRae. This has been something that I have been pressuring you to do for a while, because I know that we were going to have a good talk. The other thing that we were talking about when we kind of got disconnected there for a little bit, talking about how it's kind of strange that we have there's 4 men in here who are in different parts of the country, but still kind of, going after the same goal, that have the same interests and stuff like that. And I think it's very cool. And I'm very grateful to, kind of be a part of something bigger than me, and to be able to kind of sit back and learn and bounce ideas off you guys. And just, I love talking about this shit. So this is cool. And I'm going to take it future tense too. So I am grateful for all the blessings and opportunity that I have waiting for me in the future.
Oh, that's a beauty. That's a really good one. Your future self. Wow. I'm going to have to steal that another time down the road. So forget you said it, Kyle. I'm right there with him, McRae. I'm grateful that you were joining us today, and Kyle's absolutely right, man. We only scratched the surface. There's so much more to this, and I'm going to start really coming up with more questions for next time. So we only tickled it this time, but definitely grateful for you. I'm grateful for you guys, Alan and Kyle, for putting all the media stuff together, and I don't have to worry about any of it. McRae, I just show up, and it's pretty sweet. I don't have any headaches because these guys take care of everything each week, and the format. And Kyle, I agree with you totally that to get the 4 of us together, and we could probably expand this conversation to thousands of people across this country right now. It's just awesome. And I'm grateful also, Alan, with healthy living and health, just health overall, physical, mental, and just the clean living, lots of sleep, and really doubling down on that. And I have no complaints. So very grateful. But McRae, drum roll. Your turn.
Yeah. I am really grateful that I got to meet you guys, Alan and Crow. I really enjoyed talking to you guys. I'd love to talk more, whether it's in this format or another. I just really enjoyed it a lot. And, I'm grateful to have coworkers like Kyle. That is, you can't understate that. If I've got somebody doing an intake, if I'm not doing group, Kyle's doing group. And I tell them, they're like, "What night should I come?" I'm like, "Bro, if I was you, I'd go to Kyle's group Wednesday and Thursday." And I tell them, I send them all because it's unique. And so I'm grateful to have these people, in my life, because it's not always like that. And then I'm also grateful to have moved to Savannah. That was recent. I got a month of my life back from not commuting, and a year I get a month back. Wow. That's a huge amount. So I'm grateful just to be in the area so that I can be around some guys and you guys. Yeah, I think that's 3.
Right on.
Yeah, good stuff. Well, thank you so much, McRae. Yeah, I really appreciate your time today. All right. Well, thank you everyone for listening to another episode. Make sure that you're going on to YouTube and Instagram, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, and liking and subscribing and doing all that kind of shit that people tell you to go do. But yeah, make sure that you tune into the next episode. Thank you so much.